Okay, it's 3 o'clock. I think we are waiting for a minute for a few more people to join. Okay, so it is 5 minutes past 3. So we will start now. This is a masterclass on how to get your paper accepted at T4E 2023. So before we get into the details, let me just spend a minute on who we are in EdTech Society. It's a professional association started in India a couple of years ago by some of us to improve instruction and learning through the use of education technologies. Okay, so many of you are members, so you know that there are researchers, developers, and practitioners who are members. So this is the website of the society, etsociety.org, and ET Society runs the T4E conference. Okay, so the T4E conference is technology for education, where the for can be expanded to saying technology for FOR education, which means tools to support learning. It also means technology of education, which means understanding the processes in learning. Then there is technology in education, which is using technology to support learning. And finally, technology across education, which means using technology to enhance access to education for diverse demographics, diverse geographies, and so on. So this is the scope of T4E. So now, if we go ahead, T4E 2023 is the 11th edition organized by, it's the 11th edition of T4E. Okay, so it's organized by the EdTech Society, and it is technically co-sponsored by IEEE. What that means is that the papers will appear in IEEE Explore. In fact, some T4E papers have very high number of citations, of the order of hundreds. So T4E 2023 has multiple tracks. The first track is research studies, wherein we report research activities conducted around experiment carried out either with tools or in classes. Then there is practitioner research, which is, as a teacher, you may have tried some idea in your class and you may have generated evidence using a research method to show that your idea works. Then there is industry research, what happens for developing new products or the effectiveness and evaluation of products and so on. In addition to these, T4E 2023 has 3 more tracks. So one is called the hands-on workshop, where somebody who is skilled in a particular tool or a particular method can offer a workshop. Then there are the best practices sessions, where if you have an idea which you have used in class and you have found it to be very useful, and you can share it with others. And then there is the product session, where if you have built a tool, then you can do a demo of the tool. So these are all the sessions in T4E. And in today's session, we will only focus on this research studies and practitioner research track. So that is, those are the main papers, which are like 6 to 8 pages and 4 pages long. So we will look at how to write those papers. Okay, so there are a lot of resources which have been created, and this is the link from where you can get all these resources. Okay, so this is a document called Guidelines and Templates for Planning, Conducting, and Reporting Research in Education Technology. Okay, so it's a handbook. Now it talks about various stages of research and also provides corresponding templates to help you to carry out that stage. So this is, in brief, this is the view. So for planning, there are 2 templates. You can, they are called the idea planning template and study planning template. Then there are templates for conducting and templates for reporting the research. Okay, so do take a screenshot of this page so that you can go to the link and find these resources. Okay, having done that, we can move on. So in this session, we are going to focus only on the last stage, which is the paper writing. Okay, so that's because the abstract submission deadline is July 10th, which is 10 days away, and the paper submission deadline is July 17th, which is approximately 2 weeks away. Okay. So this session is not on carrying out a study or thinking of an idea, but this session is for those who have already carried out a study and now are writing the paper for T4E. Okay. So when we want to write a research paper, we need to know a few things, right? One is whether our work fits in the category of research for that conference. So maybe our work does not exactly fit the research category. Maybe it fits some other categories, such as teaching best practices or tools demos or some such thing. So it's important to read the call for papers carefully to figure out what category our work fits in. The second thing we need to know while writing a research paper is what do referees expect in our paper. Okay. So we need a understanding of what is important to include in the paper, right? And finally, we need to know how to structure the paper. It's not enough to know that, okay, I have to write something about my method, I have to provide some evidence. We also need to know a procedural understanding of how much to write about what part of our work. Okay, so these are the three main things, and that's what we will be talking about in today's session. So let's come to part one. Okay. So part one is about identifying whether your work fits in ET research or not. Okay. So we'll do a few exercises. So here's the first one. Is this a research paper? Okay, you can take a moment to read this and think about it. You can even put your responses in the chat. Okay. Okay. So if you have thought about this, what we find is that this is not a research paper. Okay. So many teachers say this, that I am doing all this work, I am delivering it much better than my predecessors. So therefore, what I am doing is research. So the key point here is that compilation of obvious or known solutions is not a research paper. A report of the strategy that you implemented is also not a research paper, even though the idea may have value as an effective teaching strategy. So we have to distinguish between what is research in education and what is a teaching strategy, coming up with a new teaching strategy. So to be considered as an acceptable research paper, you need to show details that prove that your strategy works, as well as that it is something unique, it is something which people have not worked on before. So that was the first example. Compilation of obvious solutions is not a paper. Then let's look at another example. Is this a research paper? Once again, I will pause here for a minute for you to read and respond. You can either make up your mind or you can put your response in the chat. Okay, I see a number of responses, some of them saying that yes, it is, some of them saying that no, it is not. Okay, so let us look into that a little more carefully. So the answer is it's not yet. You know, it is there. There is some research ideas involved here, but it is not yet a full-fledged research paper. Now, what is missing? Let's try to find that out. Okay, so what more is required? See, use of an ET tool in a routine manner is not a research paper. Okay, you need to implement an innovative method of using the tool to achieve a teaching learning goal. Okay? So that has really not particularly happened in this case, because Moodle LMS has simply been used for um, as a repository for students to access the content. Okay? Secondly, just the development of instructional material is also not a research paper, even if the material is based on an innovative idea. So what is important is that you need to show that the material has resulted in improvement in either the students' learning or the students' engagement, beyond saying that students liked it. So there has to be some formal way of evaluating it. So that is what is required. So whereas here, what has happened is, even though the instructor has attempted to create some animated videos for keeping the concepts understandable as well as being able to, for students to be able to recall, it has not been yet fully done in a slightly more formal manner. So this is still not a research paper. Let's look at a third example. Is this a research paper? Once again, I will wait for you to read and post your answers in the chat. Okay, some people are still saying not yet, still no, and so on. All right, most people are saying not yet. And the answer is correct, that it's not yet, it's almost there. Okay, it's not yet a research paper. Why not? Because simply reporting the development of an app is not a research paper, right? That you already know, as seen from your answers on the chat. Okay, you need to establish that your app is required. That's the first thing. There's a similar app is not there, or there is a problem really, and your app is an improvement on that app, and that students really need such an app. So the need has to be established. Okay. And the second thing that you have to do is you have to evaluate. So without the evaluation, it cannot be a research paper. Okay. So first thing to do is to establish that your idea is novel and not already known. And then the second thing to do is to do a carefully designed study with appropriate research methods to support your results and claims. So when you do all that, that's when it becomes a research paper. Okay, so here we will pause for a reflection and think about this question. Okay, so I assume that you have joined this session because you would like to write a paper for T4E 2023. So think about the work that you want to submit. Now, choose your option. Does your work qualify as research or not? You can be honest with yourself. You don't have to put the answer in the chat. You just have to think for yourself. Okay, do you think it's a research paper? Is all the methods, is all the pieces there, the evidence that is required, have you generated? Okay. If you feel, yes, my work may be a research paper, I have done all that. Okay, if you feel that I have implemented a novel idea and I have done a careful study to show its effectiveness for the chosen goal. Okay. Or you might feel that no, mine does not look like a research paper yet. Okay, I'm kind of along the way. I'm missing some pieces that may be required for it to qualify as research. So you can think about which of these two categories your idea that you want to submit to T4E falls into. Okay. So now, having thought about it, what you want to do is to see what to do next, right? What now? Okay, let's say you are in category 1. Okay, if you say that my work may be a research paper, then what you need to do is to pay careful attention to the next parts of the session, go to the templates and so on. And if you're saying option 2, my work does not look like a research paper yet, in fact, this is a good idea, because if you are honest with yourself and you say no, it will save you a lot of effort in attempting to write something. Then what you can do is you can look at the other tracks. So maybe you're still talking about a teaching best practice for which you have not generated a lot of evidence. That's okay. You can put it in the teaching best practices session. Or maybe you have come up with a tool, an app, but you have not completed the user testing of it, or you have not completed evaluating whether it is useful or not. So again, you might put it in the tools demo track. Okay, so that is one thing you can do if you're in option 2. And then you can also pay attention to part 2 and part 3 of this session for writing it up. So you may use the study planning template in the resources to carry out a study and submit a research paper to either next T4E or to some other conference. Okay. So it does not mean that if your idea is not ready to be a research paper right now, it does not mean that the idea has to be abandoned. It simply means that little more work has to be done and then submitted to the next conference or the next T4E, whatever comes earlier, which is suitable. Okay. Having said that, so we are done with part 1. We have understood whether what work we are doing can be categorized as research or not. And having decided that yes, my work is research and I have done all the pieces, I have a method, I have generated evidence, I have an idea and so on. Now what we need to understand is, what do referees expect? Right? So here is a review of one of my papers. I know you can't read it. It's the font size is very small. Nevertheless, it's there for you to kind of get an idea of how long the review is, how much a reviewer typically writes. Okay, so the sections are titled, discussion of related work. Okay, this paper has scored a 4, and the reviewer has written a point saying that I'm worried, however, about the fact that the authors do not relate their research to the body of literature cited in the introductory section. Then the next one is the theoretical basis for the paper, for which the referee has said that they have contextualized their research from 2 perspectives. Okay. Then there is a section where the referee has to comment about the data collection and analysis methods, and has given a score of 5, which is the top score that you can get for that. Okay. Discussion also, the referee has said that it's possible their interpretation is a valid interpretation. Okay, then the referee has given an entire rationale for why they have given this score. So they have given reasons that, okay, this is why I was surprised to see that this is happening, so on and so forth. And then there is a section which says, okay, what is the relevance to the international computing education research field? Is this a relevant? Okay. So here the referee has said that there are 2 contributions. Unfortunately, we don't know whether this is the only difference or whether there is some other difference. Something can be verified, something is not possible, right? And finally, at the end of it, even though the paper is well written, the referee is saying a weak accept because they are concerned about some of the missing links to experts' cognitive processes. Okay, so the net result of this review was that the paper was not accepted. Okay. So now the key point to remember here is, although a lot of work went into the paper and it's almost there, okay, it almost made it, the key point is that the referee's job is not to pat you on the back. Okay. So the referee's job is to find holes in your paper. And that's how the rigor in the research is maintained. So what we did was, we took all these comments, we improved upon it and resubmitted the paper. And that time it went through. So that is the whole idea of this review process, where you submit it, you get comments from the referees, and then you go ahead and improve on the basis of the comments and resubmit it to either the same or a different conference. Okay. So now coming to T4E, what are the criteria that T4E reviewers are going to look for? So I'll give you a moment to just read this. Okay, so the T4E criteria, so if you leave the overall evaluation aside, there are these things called relevance, originality, positioning, significance, quality, form, organization, form, grammar, and so on. Okay, so you've seen the description by now. So what are these things? What do they mean? Okay, so let us start with the conceptual ideas, right? What do referees look for in your paper? Okay. So the first thing is relevance. Is this relevant to this conference at all? Okay. And is it well motivated? Is this problem significant enough to be discussed in the conference? Okay. Then there is novelty, which means analysis of prior work to show that your idea is unique. Okay. Positioning, which is kind of goes hand in hand with novelty, where you're showing that okay, your idea is unique and this is the way it contributes to the existing work. Of course, there is soundness, which means that you have to show that you've done the thing carefully. There are no glaring lapses, as well as you have to have evidence to support the claim, where you generate data to show that your solution works. And overall, there has to be consistency. You cannot have a research paper which first states that okay, it states some goal X, but then what they actually do is addressing some other goal Y, and finally whatever data they have collected is actually for a third thing Z. So in that case, that is a clear invitation to reject the paper if you have three different things. So it has to be consistent. So if you say X is my goal, then whatever intervention that you do must be addressing X, and whatever data you collect must be also aligned to show that X is happening, not happening, improving, etc. So now let's look into each of these a little more closely. So like I said earlier, relevance is basically asking the question, does your work really fit what the conference is about? Okay. Is your work within scope? So what happens if you send your work to a conference that is out of scope? Okay, what happens is that the program chairs of the conference will not even send it out for review. Okay, it will be what is called a desk reject. It will be rejected right there. But then you may or may not get to know that immediately. You may still have to wait for a month to find out that that is the outcome of your paper. Okay. So in the meantime, you could have sent it to a more appropriate forum. So it's really important to make sure that you understand what the conference is about and that your work is aligned to what the conference is about. Then the second thing is significance, which is about, are you adding value to the area? Have you done interesting work? Do people care about the problem that you're working on? Is it challenging something? Is it opening up a new idea? Those things are what are looked for when a referee says, okay, what is the significance of this work? Okay, I understand that this is going to be somewhat abstract, but it's a useful thing to keep in mind when you're writing your paper. Try to keep highlighting what is interesting or what is new in your work. Okay, so now when we come to new, so what exactly is meant by this novelty, this term novelty? Okay, so if you look at the dictionary, it defines novelty as the quality of being new, unique, original, innovative, or unusual. Okay. So what has to be novel? So there are multiple things. So either the problem itself can be novel, right? You have come up with a totally new question. Like when before the advent of MOOCs, the first person who asked the question, are MOOCs effective for student learning? The problem itself would have been novel, right? So then the solution novelty is the next thing. So now once that question has been asked, different people will try to solve the problem in different ways, right? Some people will do surveys, some other people will do exams and see whether that is happening. A third set of strategy may be something else. So then there is novelty in the strategy. So everybody may have solved the problem in one way. You may be trying to solve the same problem, but in a different way. Okay, so that is novelty in the solution. Then there is novelty in the context or the domain, so where you're adapting a known solution to your context. So context could be across a subject. For example, it may be known that learners in a math setting behave in a certain way, and now you may find that the same result holds also in a social sciences setting. Okay. Or it may be geographical context. You may know that okay, learners in a particular area of the world, there is some result about that, and you find that that is also true in your area, irrespective of the social conditions. Okay, so that is the main idea behind novelty. So there has to be novelty either in the problem or in the solution or in the context. And this arrow basically indicates that it is strongest if your novelty is in the problem, and it weakens as you go lower. Okay. So at this point, a very obvious question pops up into most people's heads, which is that, okay, can a non-innovative strategy become a research paper? So the answer to that is yes, provided it is positioned well. Okay, so from novelty, now we are moving to the idea of positioning. So it is not novel. What I've done is not entirely novel, but now if I'm able to position it well, it may still be a useful research contribution. Okay, so what exactly is this positioning now? Okay, so positioning means this question: have you shown analysis of related prior work to bring out the gaps? Okay, it's basically with respect to others. So you may say that, okay, somebody has addressed this problem but only partially. Their solution works for only some cases. My solution works for a set of different cases. Okay, so what is required here is to look for papers that have addressed a problem that is similar to yours, as well as papers that have a solution approach similar to yours. Like, for example, the same solution approach you may be applying in, let's say, the field of computer science, while somebody else may have used a similar approach in, let's say, chemistry. So even though the topics are different and the problems are different, it may be that the solution approaches are similar. So you have to look at those also. So now the key question to answer is that, does your solution address any of the gaps? Okay, so it's important to identify what is the gap in the related work. So it is useful to draw this in the form of a Venn diagram or something to identify that, okay, X has done all this, Y has done something else, and Z has done something else, and still there is this piece which is missing, which nobody seems to have done, which is what I am going to do. So something like that. So the key point to keep in mind here is that as the novelty of your problem or the solution decreases, the accuracy of your positioning must increase, right? So as it becomes more and more, okay, a lot of people have worked on this. Like a classic example of this is programming. Okay, so a lot of people, there has been tons of research on programming. Okay, so the novelty of the problem now is very low. So the accuracy of, if you come up with yet another solution for teaching programming, the accuracy of your positioning must increase. You must be able to say, okay, all the existing work, they are addressing A, B, C, and D, but my thing is actually addressing E and F. So that's why my research is novel and makes a contribution. Okay. So now there is a slide. I'm not going to go through this slide. So this is a very classic reference. This is a 20-year-old reference by Mary Shaw, and on the title of the paper is called "Writing Good Software Engineering Research Papers." So what she has done is she has given examples of what is an awful way of explaining the relation of your work to related work, and what is a good way and a better way of explaining the relation. So, and it's using all these nonsensical words so that it can be used in any area. So you can replace these nonsense words with words which are meaningful to your own research context, and try to get up to good or better along the same lines. So first you only identify what all is there, then you try to say, okay, these two guys have done something in one way, then you say, okay, this guy's approach has only so much effectiveness, while that guy's approach has additional effectiveness but for only some other constraint. And then finally you say that, look, I took this, I made it better in this way, and so on. Okay, so that is the basic idea behind positioning and doing a thorough gap analysis. So at this point, what happens is that the referee is either convinced that yes, your problem is new, you are working on something worth working on, or the referee feels that, look, this is a problem that has been solved and you have not really worked on the, you have not picked a problem. There's no novelty in the problem, okay, and there may not be much novelty in the solution. So now what happens is that the referee, if the referee feels that the problem itself is not novel and the positioning is not well done, then the referee may not read all your rest of your paper where you are given the description of your work so carefully. You may just skim through it to see that, okay, what are the results, and see whether the results, is there something new in your results. Okay, so that is why this positioning of your work with respect to related work is very clear, very important. So this is especially true for the research studies. Okay. For the practitioner research track, it can be a little simpler. It can be a little bit of, you can actually get away with doing some good explanation of the related work. Okay. Having talked about that, let's talk about the next item, which is soundness of procedure. Okay, in soundness, the basic thing is, if you have already conducted the study, so there are two cases, right? Either you have already done the study, in which case you are retroactively thinking whether you did it properly or not, or you are yet to conduct the study. So if you are yet to conduct the study, then you are in good shape, because you can see the guidelines that I mentioned earlier, and you can ensure that your study is sound to begin with. But if you have already conducted the study, then what you have to think about is, what are you claiming about your solution? So your solution may be an intervention in a classroom or in an online or in a hybrid setting, or your intervention may be the development of a tool. You may say that, okay, I have developed a new tool for addressing some problem or some inconvenience in the classroom, etc. So if you say that, okay, my tool improves student engagement or something like that, you have to see whether do you have the results and the evidence to back up these claims. Okay. Now comes the main question. You have to think, could there be other reasons for these results beyond your solution, not just your solution? Is it possible that students already knew the topic? Is it possible that they learned it by, let's say, watching some other videos about the topic just before the exam, and they did not look at what you have done in class? Is it possible that the results happened because of some other subject in which they are learning it? Okay, so all of these could be, so these are called threats to validity, right? So all of these need to be ruled out, saying that, okay, it cannot be because of that, it cannot be because of this, it cannot be because of that, hence it has to be because of only my solution. Okay, so if you are not able to do that, then what you have to do is, you have to, if it's not too late, in some cases, if it's a small study, you may be able to go back, modify the study, you may be able to get a control group, or you may be able to do a pre-test and a post-test to rule out these reasons. Otherwise, at the very least, you should do is write these reasons in the limitation section of your paper. Okay, so what does that help? That helps that the referee at least understands that you know what the limitations are. Otherwise, the referee will simply point out these limitations and reject the paper. Now, when the referee is aware that you know these limitations, then the referee will perhaps decide whether, despite the limitations, is there some merit in your paper at all or not. Okay, so that is why the soundness of procedure is very important. And then there is the evidence to support your claim, right? Where the data that you have gathered should be in sync with the goal of the study. Like I mentioned earlier, your goal cannot be X and the intervention cannot be actually doing some Y, and your data cannot be for some Z. So here are some common metrics, learning effectiveness. So there are many metrics, of which the most common ones are, is my intervention effective? Are students able to perform? And is my intervention engaging? Which is, does it capture students' interest? Does it motivate them? Are they satisfied with the look and feel of the intervention, and so on. So once again, if you have already generated the evidence, then it's a matter of trying to uh, portray it in a manner that is convincing. If not, you have to learn how to measure these. Once again, you can see these guidelines or register for a research methods course. Okay, so many of these courses are available online. You can look at that also. So main point here is that this is a large part of your paper. Okay, the largest part. So often we think that a description of what we have done is the largest part. Okay, so that's not the largest part. Okay, especially if you have built a software or some app or something, we feel that I have worked so hard, I have done this, I have done that, I have integrated so many things. So we spend a lot of time writing about that. Okay, that's all fine, but for a report, for a paper, that's still only one piece. So the more important piece is, okay, you did all that, what is the use of doing that? Was it really useful? So that is the more important thing in a paper. Okay, so this evidence to support your claim should be a large part of your paper. Okay, and finally, there is the idea of coherence. Okay, so here there is a work by Jeremy Rochelle, and it is licensed under Creative Commons, so you can use it freely. So what it means is there is this nice U shape. That is all that you need to remember. Okay, so when you start with the introduction, whatever you describe in the introduction, they should be tied up again in the conclusion. So introduction and conclusion are at the same level. General means they are at a broad level. Okay. So in the introduction, you are set up the the problem such that the audience cares about it, and in the conclusion, you are explaining to them how your findings actually addressed the problem that you had set it up. Okay. So similarly, the literature survey section and the discussion section are at the same level. Okay, so the literature survey again sets up the idea of the gap, and the discussion section says how your solution addresses that gap. And the specifics is actually the body of your paper, which is where you will say, okay, what exactly was your intervention, what method you used, what data you collected, how you did the analysis, and what was the finding that you got. Okay, so all of these are the various components of your paper. So broadly speaking, there are these 5 components, and the intro and the conclusion should be at the same level, in the sense that the conclusion should come back and connect to the intro. Similarly, the discussion and lit review have to be at the same level, which means that the questions that were asked in the lit review should be answered again through the discussion in the context of your work. Okay. So here are some examples. So I will once again give you a moment to read this. Instead of going through it one by one, I thought it would be easy to just show the abstract and look at what is happening. So in one place, there is a precise problem description, right? They are saying impact of student learning of the pedagogical approach. Okay. And then they are talking about the solution approach. So this is one of the earliest papers on peer instruction. So this is a 2012 paper, right? More than 10 years ago. So that is the solution approach. Peer instruction is the solution approach, which is there is novelty. And then it also has a sound procedure, because they're saying that, okay, we are comparing 2 sections in the same term using the same content, etc., etc. And then at the end, there is an evaluation where they're saying that, okay, students in the peer instruction section did better than the standard lecture practices. Okay, so even though this is just the abstract, you are able to convey to the referee that, yes, I am precise about the problem, I have a novel solution, I have done my work soundly, and there is evidence that my solution makes a difference. Okay, so that's what you need to convey. Let's look at one more example. So this is also more than 10 years old. So here again, mental rotation is important in various fields. It establishes the importance of the problem, And then it talks about analyzing the gaps, where it says most existing techniques require weeks of training, but our training is only a 3-hour training. And then it says that, okay, it used Blender, which is in 2012 was a novel solution approach. And it also goes on to say that how the study was conducted, where there is a soundness in the evaluation, that there were 42 students. We used this mental rotation test for pre-test and post-test. And then they say that, okay, we found a large effect size, which is the evidence in support of the solution. So once again, we find that this paper has convinced the referee in the abstract itself that the problem is important. They have come up with a new solution to the problem which does not exist in the literature. They have done the solution implementation carefully, and they have done the research study also carefully, and they now have evidence that their solution works. So these are the main pieces that one has to establish. So if you do this in the abstract itself, then the chances are that the referee will read your paper a little more carefully. Otherwise, most people will skim through the paper in the first pass, and only if they find merit will they read it carefully in order to give comments. Okay. So now, how do you ensure that your research meets the referee's criteria? So again, it comes back to the resources mentioned earlier. There are various templates to help you. So if you don't yet have an idea, you can use this idea proposal template, which will help you explore if your idea is suitable or not. And then if you find that it is suitable, you can then do a study and then submit it to a later conference. Then there is the study planning template, which says that, okay, once you have an idea, how to plan the study. Should you have a control group? Should you have an experimental group? Should you have 30 students? Is it okay to do it with 5 students? Things like that, the study planning template can help you decide. And once you have what kind of data should you collect, how should you analyze the data, all that is part of the study planning template. And then there is the paper planning template, which will help you plan the ideas that are going to go into the paper, like pretty much what we talked about today. It will guide you through identifying where is the novelty in your paper, where is how to do the positioning, and so on. And finally, the paper writing template will help you to plan the paragraphs that will go into the paper. So for T4E 2023, which is just 2 weeks from the submission deadline, it's the paper writing template that you need to look at, because it gives you paragraph level ideas as to how to structure your paper. Okay. So that brings us to the third and last part, which is how to structure your paper. And if you look at the chat, the links to the templates that I'm mentioning, they are available. Okay. So a detailed answer for how to structure the paper is look at the paper writing template. Okay, the structure is already given in that. Okay, but at a conceptual level, if you want to understand, the first thing that you need to do is to write the abstract. Okay, most of the time, what we do is we say, okay, I know what I have done, so I'll write 3 pages about what I've done, and we leave the abstract writing to the end. Okay, that's often not a great idea, because then we don't know what really we are talking about. So it's best to first write the abstract and go from there, so that you have some clarity as to what you want to convey in the paper. Okay? So like, this is a very good algorithm that is given, which says that, okay, here is the problem. Just write one line about the problem. Here is the problem. Students are disengaged because of a lot of devices that they are allowed to bring into class. Okay. Then you say, okay, it's an interesting problem. Or you may say that it's a problem which many people are facing. It's still an unsolved problem. Then you can say that, okay, here is how other people are facing, but it's still an unsolved problem. So you established that it's an interesting problem and nobody has solved it yet fully. Okay. Then you talk about what is your idea to solve the problem. Maybe A, B, and C did it in one way. You are doing it in a different way. So that's the idea that you have to describe. Then you talk about why your idea works. You talk about what is the study that you conducted, what is the data that you collected, and what was your key finding. And finally, you can write a line saying what is the key contribution. How does your idea make it better for others who are going to work in this area. Okay, so that is the first thing to do, to write the abstract, and that will set the tone of how you want to convey, what you want to convey, and so on. So having done the abstract, then the thing to do is to write the introduction. Okay, once again, often we leave the writing of the introduction till the end, till everything is done. That again does not work very well, because it's important to have the flow coherent, like we talked about earlier, that the flow has to be coherent, that whatever you say in the introduction is what you must have done. If you say that, okay, let me talk about what all I have done and then put the introduction, it may be a little hard for you to tie it up. So it's basically a question of expanding the abstract. Instead of writing one line about each, now you're writing one paragraph about each. Okay, and then comes the actual writing of the paper, where the recommendation here is first write a short paper. Okay, so often we first write the long paper. Okay, we say, okay, 9 pages are there or 8 pages are there, let me write 8 pages. Okay, and in the process of writing 8 pages, we actually wind up at 13 pages, right? And then we have this problem of how to cut down the number of pages. Okay. Now, why this happens is because we focus on describing things which really need not figure in the paper. Okay. So, the way to get around that is to say that, okay, let me first write a short paper. The moment you say that, what it will do is it will help you to focus on what is the most important part of your work. What is it that you must convey? Okay, and what is okay if it is not told, right? So for example, the detail of how you actually did the coding is not required, but many people feel that that is what they have to tell, because that's where they spent the maximum amount of time. Okay, so that's why expanding the introduction, when you go from one para to one section, you will understand what is it that you're conveying. Now, this next point is also an idea that has proved to be useful, where you plan your real estate. You take a sheet of paper, divide it into 4 sections, and draw boxes which say that, okay, introduction I'm going to write so much, then the next section, related work, I'm going to write so much, methods I'm going to write so much, and so on. So when you see it on paper, you will see that, look, I have only 4-5 lines to write on this particular section. So there is no point in writing 4 pages and then struggling to reduce it to 4-5 lines, right? So that's the point, that first write a short paper, and then if you see that, yeah, I still have more to say, it's not, I'm not finished saying everything, then you write the full paper. So it is often easier to expand sections rather than reducing the page length after writing everything. And let's say you do go for the full paper, the 8-page paper. This is a approximate suggestion of how the pages should be distributed, right? So 1 page for the introduction, 1 page for the related work and positioning, 2 pages for your solution and your implementation. Okay, that's the design and what you did and so on. And then 1.5 pages for the research method. What is the method that you use, how you did the research, what is the data that you collected, how you did the analysis of the data. And then 1.5 pages to talk about the results, what you found. And finally, 1 more page on the discussion of what you found and the conclusion. Okay, so this is a rough guideline for how to structure your paper. And for a short paper or a 4-page paper, you can just divide this by 2, and that will give you the pie will remain the same, but the number of pages just reduces. So instead of 1 page, you write half a page introduction. Okay, so now coming to the conclusion, we are coming to the end of it with 2-3 more minutes left. So in conclusion, this diagram is important, which will tell you which template to use at which stage. So if you are at the reporting stage, right now you're looking at the paper writing template, and the important thing that it helps you bring is the coherence of your work. If you are at the early stage, then and you are thinking about what research I should do, then take the idea planning template, and it will help you to right away determine whether your idea has novelty, whether others have done it or not, and so on, so that it will save you a lot of trouble in terms of first doing all the work and then finding out, oh, there is no novelty in my work, so that you will not fall into that trap. And then if you are already got an idea and you are in the conducting a study stage, look at the study planning template, which will tell you what mistakes to avoid and what procedures to follow, and generate evidence for your claims. Okay. So if you don't want to read the 88-page document, which is the guidelines document itself, so there is a 4-page version. You can go to my web page. If you Google Sridhar Iyer IIT Bombay, it will take you to my web page. If you click on papers, it will take you to a place where you can find this paper called Guidelines and Templates. And then if you click on talks again from my web page, you will find a tutorial with the same name, which is a more expanded version of this talk that I have given just now. Okay, so with that, that is the end of really the talk. And now we are open for questions. So you can put your questions in the chat, if any, and it's okay even if it takes 10 more minutes to answer the questions. Okay. Um there are some new comments. So if you want, if you are writing a paper for T4E, if you want, you can describe your idea briefly and what you have done briefly in the chat, and then I can comment about what you should look out for. If you have attended this session just to get a broad idea of how to go ahead and know what to do, then this may be fine. It may be okay to log off now. Okay, I waited for 2 minutes. I don't see any questions in the chat. And it's now 4 o'clock. So thank you for joining, and we will close this session here. Okay, I see a point. Okay, so somebody is saying I'm writing a paper on the new LED constructor tool that you have developed. I am struggling to find relevant literature to prove that there is a research gap. Okay, so now that is something. Hmm. So if it's a constructor tool, how to make an LED, it may not really be a research paper, it may be more of a development paper. So because it may be more about the tool that you're using, or the steps that you're making. So if it is part of the steps of how to make a video, if they are well known, then it is going to be very difficult for you to say that the tool is new. But what you can look at is the ease of use, because you are saying that it's a new tool that you have developed. So what you can see is that, okay, if I follow the steps which are given earlier, then students get stuck, or the teachers who are making videos, they get stuck. But on the other hand, if you use my tool, then it streamlines some process. So what you can do is you can try to attempt to tackle a metric called efficiency rather than any effectiveness or engagement. So you say that it makes something easier for the user. So that is the angle that you could take if you are writing a paper on LED constructor tool that you are coming up with. Okay. The other question is, can a descriptive study using survey method be appropriate for this workshop? So here again, it depends upon what is the question that you are investigating and how well have you done that investigation. So broadly speaking, yes, you can do a survey, but it cannot be simply saying that, okay, I found 10 papers on this topic, this is what this paper talks about, that is what that paper talks about. So those things may not be of much use. So if it's a survey, you have to say, okay, this is the theoretical lens that I am taking for doing the survey, and these are the this is what my findings are, this is the analysis method. So when you're using this the analysis method, how you have done the analysis to come up with the findings, that is important. Okay. Uh, the next question seems to be, what should be the consideration if the study is qualitative? Uh, so, if the study is qualitative, the consideration should be in terms of what is the, how do you convince the referee, right? So the referee, often referees will be convinced by statistics, but in this case you are not going to have statistics because you are doing the study is qualitative. So what you should not do is try to claim generalizability. So the orienting the research question in such a way that it makes sense to use a qualitative method. For example, you may say that, look, we are trying to find out how students think. Okay, so in that case, a qualitative study would make more sense, because we are not trying to generalize and say that, look, all students think in this manner or something like that. So that could be one consideration, the framing of the research question. So if you've already done the study, then you can frame the research question. Maybe you had a bigger research question in mind, but you take a smaller piece of the research question and focus it in that manner. Okay. Then I see a question. I am writing a paper on effectiveness of an interactive MOOC and its platform developed by me, and testing its effectiveness through a quasi-experimental study. Okay, that's good. If you're doing that, then yeah. So when you say effectiveness, again you have to be careful as to what you are measuring, what you are testing as effectiveness. So are you talking about effectiveness of the use of the MOOC itself, which means like, are students able to quickly find the information, or are you talking about effectiveness of the content that they are learning? So those things you have to make sure that you're aligned. So the coherence is the important thing for you, to ensure that what you're saying in the introduction as to what you're doing is what you're actually doing in the methods and the results section, and that has some contribution in the conclusion section. Okay. Uh, I am at initial state of my work. Can I submit my review work with proposed solution to T4E? So review work with proposed solutions are not usually sufficient, but you can look at the other tracks. If you look at, like, for example, maybe is it, if it's a teaching practice, you may talk about that, or you may submit it as a poster, not as a paper. You may submit it as a poster. So you look at the other tracks. It will not fit the research track right now. Okay. Okay, so that seems to be all the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to take this moment to thank you, Dr. Sridhara here, and all the participants who joined this session. And please do share. The YouTube link will be available for you to share with others as well. Thank you, everyone. And so you can continue the conversation here as well. Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.